This is the second lesson in Chapter 2. This lesson is about percents and estimation. For us, we're going to call this our mental math lesson. This is a wonderful math lesson. It is an excellent workout for your brain. You are going to love it, and we will enjoy some new learning today. So we only have one note for Chapter 2, Lesson 2. That note is to find 10% of a number mentally, move the decimal one place to the left. To find 10% of a number mentally, move the decimal one place to the left. Everything we do in mental math with percents hinges around us being able to find 10% of a number. Okay, so we can do a couple practice questions here. Really quickly, if I wanted to find 10% of the number 24, I just take my decimal and I move it one place to the left. The answer is 2 4/10. If I want to find 10% of 50, take my decimal, move it one place to the left. The answer is 5. If I want to find 10% of 800, you guessed it, take my decimal, move it one place to the left. My answer is 80. It is very, very easy to find 10% of a number. We just take our decimal and move it one place to the left. We'll see one more of these. If I wanted to find 10% of 1 5/10, take my decimal, move it one place to the left, and I get 15/100. Easy, easy, quick. This is how mental math works with percents. We're focusing on the 10% mark. Okay? So here's an example for us. I'm going to tell you this is not in your notes. You can write this down, or you can just pay attention and get your practice problems done immediately after this while it's still fresh in your brain. So first question here, what number is 10% of 80? Well, if this whole diagram here represents 80, then 10% is 8. Okay, I just took my decimal and I moved it one place to the left. Well, that's great, but what if we want to find 20%? What if we want to know what's 20% of 80? Easy. If I know 10%, I just double it to get 20%. 20% of 80 is 2 10%. So an 8 and another 8. If we know 10%, we can multiply by 2 to get 20%. So 20% of 80 is 16. If I want to know 30% of 80, well, 10% is 8. 20% is another 8, that's 16. 30% is 3/8. 30% is 24. Remember I said mental math with percents hinges around us knowing what 10% is. Let's try another one. Let's go a little bigger this time. What if I want to know what is 60% of 80? 60%. Well, now I have to think. 60%, how many tens is that? That's 6 tens. So here I've got 3 tens, 4 tens, 5 tens, 6 tens. There's my 60%. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eighths. 8 times 6 is 48. So 60% of 80 is 48. And you're saying, well, this is great. This is wonderful, fantastic. But what if I want to know something like 75%? So it's not just a perfect 70% or 60%, something that's divisible, not something that ends in 0, that's divisible by 10. I can help with that too. So 75%, I've got to get 70% here. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 60%. Let's get our 70%. And now we need 5%. We need 5%. Well, if I know that 10% is 80, 10% is 8. 5% is half of 10%, isn't it? So I need a bar that is half of a tenth. There it is. So 75% of 80, we've got 7 of our 10%, and we've got a 5% here. 8 times 7 is 56, plus our 5%, so plus our 4 is 60. If we know how to find 10%, we can find almost any percent of a number as long as it's reasonable. We wouldn't want to be dealing with decimal percents. That gets a little bit tricky there. But basics for us are 5%, 10%, 20, 30, 60, stuff like that. So if this is something that didn't click the first time, stop it, watch it again. Get this idea of why 10% is so important for us to find, because it's so quick, it's so easy, and because we can turn a 10% into a 20 or a 30 or a 60. We can turn a 10% into a 5, okay, just by doing a little bit of multiplying or dividing. So you've got the idea behind mental percents. Your brain has gone from tired to strong. Here's your to-do list for today. First, I want you to practice your mental math with percents. Practice those practice problems that we have in our notes. Get them done. Get strong with this. Ask a family member to give you challenges. Ask them to keep it pretty simple. Things like, 20% of 13. You could do that. You can do that. I know you can. All right. Once you get good with your 10% and your 20%, have them ask you some with 5% involved. Remember, 5% is just half of 10%. So maybe like 5% of 100. Find your 10%, divide it in half. Once you're good with 5% and 10%, think about, hey, how can I do 1%? How could I do 2%, 3%? Try and figure those out. We can talk about them in class tomorrow. And again, like I said, finish your 2.2 practice problems. Do them mentally. Do not show your work. I don't want to see long multiplication problems. I want to see that you are trying these out by finding the 10% and then working that out into other percents. Okay? That's it for today. Great job. We'll talk more about this tomorrow.